You know, it's a very curious thing about human beings. We are never quite content to simply see. The moment something marvelous occurs, we feel compelled to talk about it, to share it, to translate it into words. If we fall in love, we write poetry. If we touch the infinite, we write scriptures. But what happens when what we've seen, what we've tasted, cannot be translated at all? For those who begin to awaken, truly awaken, this becomes one of the strangest and most humbling discoveries. You see, you've touched something that words can't quite hold. It's as though you've glimpsed the ocean through a keyhole, and now you're trying to tell the fish inside the keyhole what the sea is like. They can't imagine it. They've never felt the tide moving through them. And yet, you try. You reach for metaphors. You speak of light, of oneness, of God, and somehow every word betrays the very thing it tries to describe. That is why all the wise traditions begin in silence. The Buddha smiled instead of explaining. Lao Tzu began his great book with a confession: the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And Jesus, when asked about the kingdom of heaven, so often answered with a parable, a story that gestures beyond language rather than into it. You see, silence is not the absence of truth. It is the womb of truth. It is the stillness before the sound, the pause between the notes. And yet, how hard it is for us to trust it. We imagine that understanding is a matter of saying more, piling word upon word, until the infinite is neatly packaged and labeled. But the infinite laughs at labels. It leaks through every definition like water through a net. And so, when one awakens, when you begin to see that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, something peculiar happens. The tongue falters. You find yourself unable to explain what has happened, because you have not acquired something new. You have lost something, the old illusion of separateness, of being a lonely self rattling around inside a skin. You have lost the capacity to believe in the drama quite as seriously as before. And how do you describe the taste of losing illusion? The paradox of awakening is that it wants to speak and must not. It burns in the heart like fire, yet cools the tongue into quietness. You wish to tell the world, "I've seen it. I've seen what it all means." And yet, you know, the very instant you speak, it will slip away like mist vanishing in the morning sun. Because language lives in time, and what you've touched is beyond time. Carl Jung once said that when a person glimpses the divine, the danger is that the ego rushes in to claim it. "I," it says, "have seen God." But the moment you say "I," the vision vanishes. The very seeing was the dissolving of that I. The silence that followed was its burial. The paradox is this: you wish to share your awakening, yet to share it truthfully, you must first die to the one who wants to speak. And so the sages laughed. They laughed not out of mockery, but relief. They knew that truth is like laughter, spontaneous, ungraspable, dissolving the effort to hold it. For you cannot possess awakening, you can only be it. And to be it, you must let go of the need to announce it. That is why, if you've begun to see through the game, you may find yourself speaking less. You listen more. You move more gently. You feel less inclined to correct, to convert, to convince. It is not that you've become cold or distant. You've simply recognized that no sermon, no scripture, no philosophy can give another what they must find in themselves. The finger can point to the moon, but it cannot deliver moonlight. So, my friends, when awakening dawns, whether through meditation, through heartbreak, through crisis, or through laughter, cherish the silence that follows. Guard it like a flame in the wind, for it is not a silence of ignorance, but of reverence. It is the silence of knowing that reality does not need your commentary to exist. And in that silence, something extraordinary begins to happen. The world which once seemed made of separate things, begins to sing. The trees breathe with you. The wind whispers in your bones. The stars stop being distant. They begin to hum inside your chest. And you realize at last that the silence was never empty. It was full, overflowing, pregnant with everything that ever was or will be. This, then, is the paradox of silence. The more you awaken, the less there is to say, and the more that silence itself begins to speak. You see, the first thing that one must learn to keep sacredly quiet about is that initial, dazzling vision of the infinite, that moment when the veil seems to part, and for an instant you see through the whole cosmic charade. Perhaps it came to you in meditation, perhaps in a dream, or in the simple stillness between heartbeats. Or perhaps, as it so often does, it arrived in crisis when everything you clung to finally fell apart. For just a flicker of time, something vast broke through. The self dissolved, and you found yourself as wide as the sky. The air shimmered with intelligence. Every sound seemed to arise from a single breath. And the world, instead of being outside you, appeared as a dance within you. You may have thought, "Ah, I have seen God." But, you see, the moment you say that, poof, it's gone, because it wasn't you who saw it. It was God seeing through you. This is the first silence, the silence of the infinite. It is not the kind of silence that you must force or guard like a secret club. It is the silence that happens naturally when you realize that no explanation can possibly touch what you've experienced. Words are too small, too slow, too linear to carry the boundless. You could talk about it for lifetimes, and still it would slip through every syllable like wind through your fingers. And yet how tempting it is to tell someone. You meet your friend, your teacher, your spouse, and you say, "I've seen the truth." But the strange thing is, the more you speak of it, the less it feels alive. The infinite becomes an idea, a trophy for the mind to polish, when in fact it was never meant to be possessed. This is why the mystics go quiet after awakening. Not because they are being secretive, but because the infinite has no opposite, no explanation, no audience. When you try to share it, you divide it into speaker and listener, and the whole miracle collapses back into duality, into me and you, this and that, here and there. Carl Jung once observed that a vision of the divine is always accompanied by danger. He said the ego may rush in, claiming, "I have seen the light." And that subtle claim that I instantly becomes a shadow. The ego begins to wear the experience as a badge of honor. It turns the infinite into an achievement. But you can no more achieve awakening than you can achieve the sunrise. It simply happens when you stop pretending to be the one making it happen. The wise ones knew this. They smiled, they bowed their heads, and they went on sweeping the floor. Because the vision, when it's true, changes you quietly. It rearranges your being, not your biography. You don't need to tell anyone the way you walk, the way you breathe, the way you listen to the rain will say it for you. So the first silence, then, is this. Do not talk about your union with the infinite. Let it breathe. Let it root itself in you. For the moment you try to describe it, you turn eternity into a story, and eternity has no interest in stories. Let your vision remain unspoken until it becomes ordinary. Let it settle into the bones until it no longer feels like a vision at all, but like seeing itself effortless, natural, obvious. And then perhaps you will discover the secret that every mystic finally learns, that the infinite was never something you found. It was simply what was left when you stopped searching, when you stopped speaking, when you stopped being so terribly eager to explain yourself to the universe. The universe already knows. Now, if the first silence is the hush that follows the vision of the infinite, the second silence is quite the opposite. It's not luminous at all. In fact, it's dark, heavy, uncomfortable. For when the light of awakening dawns, it does not only illuminate the heavens, it throws light into the cellar, and what you find there can be rather unpleasant. You see, everyone carries within them a shadow, that great sprawling bundle of things we'd rather not admit. Fears, angers, desires, shames, the parts of ourselves that were pushed down into the basement of the psyche because someone once told us they were unacceptable. And when consciousness expands, it doesn't just expand upward into angelic realms. It expands in all directions, which means you begin to see, really see, what you've been hiding. Carl Jung understood this beautifully. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is the second silence. The silence of meeting your own darkness without trying to justify it, preach it, or parade it before the world. When you first begin to see the shadow, the temptation is to confess, to announce, to dramatize. Ah, you say, I have discovered my repressed wounds, my past, my karmic patterns, and you want to talk about it endlessly, as though by talking you could control it. But the more you talk about your shadow, the more you feed it, the more you give it attention, identity, weight. True integration happens not through proclamation, but through stillness, through the quiet courage of looking inward without turning away. It is rather like sitting in a dark room until your eyes adjust. At first, you panic, I can't see anything. But if you remain still, you begin to make out shapes, textures, movement, and you realize the darkness isn't hostile, it's simply unknown. It's you, the you, that never had a chance to speak. Alan Watts might have said that your devils and your angels are simply two sides of the same cosmic coin, two masks in the divine play. To reject one is to reject half of yourself, and to identify with one is to lose the whole. So, the work of the second silence is to welcome both, to sit at the table with your demons and pour them tea. But don't post it on social media. Don't rush to tell everyone that you've met your shadow, because the shadow is shy. The moment you expose it to too much light, it retreats again into trickery and disguise. You must let it unfold in private, in the quiet intimacy of your own awareness. This is why, throughout history, those on the path have withdrawn for a time not as an escape, but as an incubation. The silence protects the alchemy. It allows the lead to turn to gold without disturbance. If you speak too soon, you release the heat, and the transformation halts. To meet your shadow, then, is not to conquer it, but to befriend it, to listen to what it has been whispering all along, that everything you rejected in yourself was simply an orphaned piece of the whole. And in that listening, that deep, wordless listening, the shadow dissolves back into the light from which it came. You don't have to fix it, you don't have to confess it, and you don't have to explain it. You only have to see it, silently, completely. And then, quite unexpectedly, compassion arises. Not as an idea, but as a fragrance. You see that everyone else is wrestling with their shadows too, each carrying the same unspoken sorrow of separation. And suddenly, judgment evaporates. You stop trying to make yourself pure and begin to understand what it means to be whole. So keep this second silence close to your heart. Do not announce your darkness. Sit with it. Let it teach you. For the day will come when you realize that the shadow was never your enemy, it was the doorway back into your humanity. There comes a stage, after the silence of the infinite and the silence of the shadow, when life itself begins to speak to you, but not in words. It speaks in patterns. A song you haven't heard in years plays just as a thought arises in your mind. A stranger repeats the very phrase you dreamed of last night. The clock strikes at the exact moment you look up, and somehow you know it means something. At first, you think you've gone mad, or perhaps that the universe has developed a peculiar fondness for playing games with you. But it isn't madness, you see. It's simply that the boundary between the inside and the outside has grown thin. The old distinction between me and the world begins to shimmer like a mirage, and reality starts to behave as though it were listening to itself through you. This is what Jung calls synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that defies cause and effect. It's when the psyche and the cosmos seem to dance in step, revealing that they are not two dancers at all, but one rhythm expressing itself as both. And yet, this is the third silence, for you must not rush to shout about it. The universe doesn't reveal its secrets to satisfy curiosity. It reveals them to deepen wonder. When the pattern shows itself, your task is not to collect it, categorize it, or build a religion out of it. Your task is to watch, quietly, as if witnessing a miracle you have no right to explain. Because the moment you start telling everyone about your signs and messages, the subtle harmony slips through your fingers. What was a living conversation with the whole becomes an argument with yourself. The ego takes over again. I, it says, am being guided. But who is the I that can be guided? If everything is already one process. Alan Watts might have smiled and said the universe is playing hide and seek, and now it's starting to wink. And the wise response to a cosmic wink is not to publish a book about it, but to wink back. To laugh softly in the privacy of your own being, knowing that existence has a sense of humor. You see, the deeper truth of synchronicity is not that the universe is giving you secret messages. It's that you and the universe were never separate to begin with. The messages are you, the messenger is you, and so is the meaning. When the world begins to echo your thoughts, it is simply reflecting the intimacy that was always there. And yet, this intimacy is fragile like dew on morning grass. It vanishes when touched too roughly. To speak of it prematurely is to turn the sacred into spectacle. It's like trying to photograph the wind. The moment you try to capture it, it's gone. So the third silence is the silence of reverence. When patterns arise, bow to them quietly. Keep them as private poems between you and the great mystery. Let them work on you from within, because each synchronicity is not a message to be decoded, but a mirror showing you how profoundly reality and awareness intertwine. When you stop trying to explain it, something even more extraordinary occurs. The need for explanation itself begins to fade. You no longer demand meaning from the universe. You begin to feel meaning as the pulse of life itself. Every leaf, every passing face, every sound becomes part of an intricate, living mandala, beyond belief, beyond reason, beyond the need to make sense. And that is why this silence is necessary. It keeps the mystery alive. It allows wonder to mature into wisdom. It transforms coincidence into communion. The universe is speaking, but only those who can listen without interrupting will hear the music. Now, if the third silence is the hush of the world whispering back to you, then the fourth is something deeper still, the silence that comes when even the whisper stops. When not only the world disappears, but you disappear along with it. You see, there comes a moment on this peculiar path when the self that has been seeking begins to dissolve into the very thing it was seeking. All your spiritual ambitions, all your ideas of progress, growth, enlightenment melt like snow under the sun. And what remains is nothing, not the nothing of despair, but the nothing that is everything. It's what the Buddhists call shunyata, the void, the emptiness that is not a void of things, but the spaciousness within which all things appear. It is the background silence of existence, the stillness out of which every sound, every thought, every heartbeat arises and returns. To encounter this, is to feel the bottom fall out of everything you thought you were. The ground goes missing, the center vanishes, and you discover with a mixture of terror and laughter that there never was a center. That what you called me was a pattern in the mist, a story the mind was telling itself. Alan Watts loved to point out that when we look for the self, we find it the way we find the center of a whirlpool. It's there but not there, a form made of motion. Try to hold it, and it slips through your fingers, because it was never an object to be caught. It was a dance. And this is the moment of the fourth silence, when the dancer realizes there was never a dance partner, only the dancing. When the witness and the witnessed collapse into one seamless happening, when all your boundaries dissolve like chalk lines in the rain. Now, here's the great danger. If you talk about this too soon, people will think you've gone mad. And in a sense, they're right. You have. You've lost the conventional mind, the one that needs edges and labels and certainties. You've stepped off the map, and there are no words for the territory beyond. You can no longer say, I saw God, because the I is gone. You can't even say, there is God, because there's no longer a distinction between there and here. There is only this. And yet, the urge to speak about it arises to share the wonder of what you've seen. But beware. The moment you turn it into doctrine, you drag the infinite back into the narrowness of belief. You turn the wordless sky into a cage of syllables. The old Zen masters understood this. When a monk asked, "What is the essence of reality?" the master would shout, or laugh, or strike the floor with his stick, because any answer in words would have been false. Silence, laughter, or a sudden gesture, these were truer than explanation. To see the void, you must fall into it. And to stay with it, you must say nothing. It isn't that there's some hidden truth you must guard from others. No, it's that there's simply nothing left to say. You open your mouth, and the words feel absurd. How can you describe a silence so total that it contains every sound? How can you explain a mystery that has swallowed the one who would explain it? The mind tries to grasp, but the hands of thought close on air. The only honest response is awe, the quiet, luminous awe that doesn't need to understand. And so, when the void visits you, when the self collapses into the infinite, and you feel that exquisite vanishing, don't rush to tell the world about it. Don't turn it into a souvenir. Let it undo you completely. Let it wash through every corner of your being until the one who wanted to speak has dissolved. Then, when you return, for you will find the world exactly as it was before. The same trees, the same faces, the same heartbeat, but everything will be shining with an invisible light, because now you know there is no distance between you and it. The void isn't somewhere else. It's what allows the world to be. And so, the fourth silence is not the silence of suppression, it's the silence of realization. It's the quiet of a universe that has finally recognized itself. It is the silence in which all things sing, though no sound is made. Now, my friends, the fifth silence is perhaps the most misunderstood of all. It is the silence that follows when you see through not only the illusion of self, but the illusion of should, that curious word which has ruled the human mind for millennia. You see, we've been trained from birth to measure life by rules. What's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, what's shameful. Every religion, every society, every family has handed us a script, and we've spent our years rehearsing it, terrified of forgetting our lines. But awakening, in its quiet and inconvenient way, pulls the script right out of your hands. You stand there on the stage of existence with no cue cards, no director, no applause, just the vast improvisation of the now. And here's the curious thing. When you realize there's no fixed moral law carved into the stars, you don't become wicked. You become free, and freedom, real freedom, has its own spontaneous goodness. Alan Watts loved to remind us that when you truly see life as a play, you don't cheat at it. You play better. You play with skill, grace, and humor. Because you understand it's a game, a sacred game, but a game nonetheless. The wise man doesn't break the rules out of rebellion. He simply knows that the rules were invented to make the game more interesting. But here lies the danger and the reason for this fifth silence. When you first awaken to this freedom, you might feel the impulse to shout it from the rooftops. Nothing is right or wrong. Everything is one. And though that may be true in the ultimate sense, it is disastrously confusing in the ordinary world, because not everyone is seeing from the same height of the mountain, and to those still climbing, your freedom looks like chaos. So, the awakened learn to keep quiet, not because they fear punishment, but because they see that moral codes are scaffolding for those still building their inner house. You don't kick away another man's ladder because you've already reached the roof. The Buddha still kept his vows. Jesus still honored the law of love. Lao Tzu still spoke of balance. They lived the forms, but without bondage to them. Outwardly ordinary, inwardly unbound. And this is the mark of maturity, to live among people as though nothing has changed, while knowing that everything has. Now, Carl Jung would have said that morality, in its truest sense, is not obedience to a rule, but harmony with the self, the whole psyche, the complete pattern. When you act from that wholeness, you don't need commandments. Your very being becomes the law. You don't have to remember to be kind, or humble, or just. These things arise like fragrance from a flower. But if you try to flaunt that freedom, to show others how beyond morality you've become, you fall right back into the trap of ego. That's why this silence is so subtle. You must live your realization quietly, as fragrance, not as sermon. And so, the awakened man or woman moves through the marketplace unnoticed. They buy vegetables, laugh with children, pay their taxes, make love, fall ill, and die, all as before. But within, they have no division between sacred and profane, right and wrong, holy and unholy. Everything, every act, every moment is the one expressing itself. The fifth silence, then, is the silence of naturalness. The silence that comes when you no longer need to prove your purity, defend your virtue, or advertise your enlightenment. You become simple again, not morally superior, but transparent. You don't try to be good. You can't help but be good, because there's no you left to be otherwise. This is why the saints and sages often appear eccentric, unpredictable, even scandalous to those who love rigid rules. They move according to a deeper rhythm, a law that isn't written in books but inscribed in the heartbeat of the cosmos. Their kindness is effortless, their laughter unplanned, their presence enough. So, let this silence protect you. Don't rush to declare your freedom from rules. Let it show itself in gentleness, in patience, in how you treat the smallest things. Let people discover your freedom not in what you say, but in how easy you are to be with. And when they ask, what guides you now if not morality, simply smile, because the real answer cannot be spoken. It is life itself, moving as you. Now, if you have followed me this far, through the light, the shadow, the patterns, the void, and the freedom, you may be wondering, what happens next? What does one do with all of this? The answer, my friends, is beautifully paradoxical. You do nothing, and yet everything begins to move in harmony. This is the art of sacred secrecy, not the secrecy of hiding something, but the secrecy of allowing something to live quietly within you, untouched by the noise of the world. You see, in the old alchemical traditions, they would speak of the opus magnum, the great work, where the base metal of the self is transmuted into gold. And the first rule of alchemy was this: do not open the vessel before the process is complete, because if you expose it too early, the heat escapes, the transformation fails, and all you're left with is smoke. Silence is the vessel. Experience is the fire. And wisdom, the pure gold, is what forms in time when you've had the patience to let your revelation mature. That is why every genuine awakening, sooner or later, leads to quietness. You realize that no one can be convinced into seeing. You cannot hand another your vision. You can only become it. You embody the truth instead of explaining it. This is sacred secrecy. It is not repression, not a refusal to speak out of fear or pride, but reverence. It is the understanding that life, like music, must have its pauses. The rests are as essential as the notes. Without them, there is only noise. And when you allow your insights to remain unspoken, something extraordinary happens. They begin to shape you from the inside. The truth you cannot tell becomes the rhythm of your breathing, the softness of your eyes, the patience in your listening. You start to communicate without words. That, you see, is real teaching, not the transmission of ideas, but the transmission of being. Alan Watts once said that when you understand the dance of life, you don't try to hold it still. You dance along. You laugh when it laughs, cry when it cries, and move with its music without trying to control the tune. The one who keeps the secret gracefully discovers that the secret keeps them. Sacred secrecy doesn't mean withdrawal from the world. It means being so at home in it that you no longer need to prove anything. You live your truth quietly, like a lamp behind a curtain, not hidden, just not flaunted. The light filters through naturally, and those ready to see will find it. There is an elegance to this way of being, an elegance born of restraint. You stop scattering your energy in explanations and start pouring it into presence. You stop performing spirituality and start embodying simplicity. And then you begin to see that life itself has always been a kind of cosmic secret, an open secret. Everything has been saying it all along, the wind in the leaves, the laughter of children, the silence between heartbeats. But only when you stop shouting your questions do you hear the answer. So, let your awakening be like a seed buried in good soil. Don't dig it up to check if it's growing. Trust the silence. Let it sprout in its own season. One day, others will see the flower, and they will ask what kind of seed it was, and you will smile, because by then, you will have forgotten that you ever planted it. That is the art of sacred secrecy, the art of becoming transparent enough that truth can shine through you without obstruction. And in that shining, you realize there was never anything to hide, only something too vast, too intimate, too alive to be captured in words. You have become the secret itself, and the secret has become you. You see, every silence we've spoken of, the silence of the infinite, of the shadow, of the patterns, of the void, of freedom, and of secrecy, all of them ripen toward a single fragrance, a single flower. And that flower is compassion. Now, most people imagine compassion as something you do, a moral duty, a commandment, a virtue to be practiced. But the compassion that grows from silence is not something you do. It's something that happens to you. The way a flower blooms when the sun rises. It cannot be forced because it isn't born of will. It's born of seeing. When you have seen through yourself, through the masks, the roles, the ambitions, and the fears, what remains is not cold detachment, but warmth. It's as though the walls have fallen away and you finally realize everyone, absolutely everyone, is fighting the same invisible battle. Every smile hides a bruise. Every boast hides a trembling heart. Every argument is a cry for belonging. And then, instead of judging, you start to understand. The mystics knew this long before psychology gave it a name. When the sense of I dissolves, there's no one left to defend, no one left to condemn. What's left is a great, effortless tenderness, not sentimental pity, but the simple recognition that all beings are you in disguise. Carl Jung said that individuation, the full flowering of consciousness, always ends in service, not as duty, but as inevitability. When the circle closes, you find that the self includes the whole of creation. You care because you can't help it. Alan Watts used to put it more playfully. He said, when you know you're it, when you know that this whole blooming, buzzing confusion is what you are, how could you not love it? But this love is not the sticky, clinging kind. It's not, I love you because I need you. It's, I love you because you are me, and I am you, and there's nothing else to do. It's the laughter of seeing through the cosmic hide and seek that all along, the seeker and the sought were the same actor, changing masks. Now here is the quiet miracle. This compassion doesn't make you solemn or saintly. It makes you light. You begin to find humor even in tragedy. Not because you are callous, but because you see that life is indestructible. You can cry and laugh at the same time, tears for the play, laughter for the truth behind it. And that, my friends, is the fruit of silence. When you have stopped needing to prove, explain, or defend your awakening, it blossoms naturally into kindness. You hold the world more gently, not because it's fragile, but because it's holy. You begin to help others not by preaching, but by presence. Your very stillness becomes medicine. People feel safer around you, though they can't quite say why. It's because you are no longer transmitting your inner noise. You are transmitting space. And in that space, others can hear their own truth echoing back to them. This is the final irony of awakening. You disappear, and in disappearing, you become truly useful. You no longer try to save the world, and so you finally begin to heal it. Not with miracles, not with doctrines, but with small human things. Listening without judgment, smiling without reason, loving without condition. That's what all the silence was for. To bring you here to this open, quiet compassion that has no opposite. And if you listen closely, you will realize that even the silence is compassionate. It never condemns, never hurries, never demands. It simply holds everything, joy and sorrow, light and shadow, in one infinite, forgiving embrace. So let your awakening end not in fireworks, but in kindness. Let the final proof of your enlightenment be how gently you walk through the world. For compassion is the language of the awakened, and silence is its accent. You know, when all is said and done, and most of it has been said far too many times, there is really nothing left to explain. The truth doesn't live in explanations. It sings, and like any good music, it needs silence to be heard. Throughout this little journey, we've spoken of silence in many forms, the silence of awe, of shadow, of mystery, of freedom, of compassion. But in the end, all these are only movements of one great symphony. And that symphony is what you are. The universe has been improvising you since the beginning of time, just as it improvises the stars, the mountains, and the waves. It's playing itself as you. And the wonder of it all is that there is no final chord, no grand crescendo. The music never concludes. It only deepens, folds back upon itself, and begins again. You see, when you've heard the melody of awakening, you realize that the point was never to reach the last note, but to learn how to listen, how to hear the music behind the noise of the world and behind the noise of your own thoughts. For most people, life is spent trying to make sense of the lyrics. But the wise learn to hear the tune, and that tune is silence, the kind that hums softly under everything, like the low drone beneath a song. It's there when the wind rustles through the trees. It's there in the pause before a friend replies. It's there in your own breath, when you stop chasing yourself. This is the music of unspoken truth. You can't write it down. You can't perform it on stage. You can only live it like a dancer, who is the dance, or a flame that forgets the distinction between burning and being burned. All our striving, our philosophies, our religions, they were never mistakes, you see. They were preludes. They brought us to the edge of words so that we might finally fall into silence. And what a marvelous fall it is. When you fall into that silence, You discover it's not an absence, but a fullness so complete that even death cannot subtract from it. It's the still point from which all things move, and to which all things return. The mystics called it God, or the Tao, or the Self. The poets called it love. But all of them were simply trying to hum along with the same unspeakable tune. And once you hear it, truly hear it, you don't need to argue, or convince, or preach. You simply smile, because you recognize that everyone, even those who seem lost or asleep, are humming it too, perhaps out of key, perhaps unconsciously, but humming nonetheless. And that's the compassion we spoke of earlier. The silence listens to every note, every dissonance, every mistake, and welcomes it all into harmony. So if there is any advice I could leave you with, it would be very simple. Don't try to capture the truth. Dance with it. Don't try to speak the silence. Listen to it. And don't worry about awakening. It was never something you had to achieve. It was only something you had to notice. Because what you've been looking for, what every sage, every seeker, every dreamer has been searching for, has never been hidden. It's right here, in the space between these words, in the breath that's reading them, in the awareness that knows you are alive. And when you stop reaching for it, it plays itself, the great cosmic music, through you, effortlessly, eternally. So let the words fall away now. Let the mind rest. Listen, just listen to the silence behind the sound. There. That's it. That's what you've been trying to say all along.